You're listening to Trek FM.
Want to join in the conversation and share your thoughts on this episode? Join the Babel Conference, our listeners' discussion group on Facebook. Just type BABEL into the Facebook search field, and we'll look forward to seeing you there.
This is Steve Sansweet of Rancho Obi-Wan, and you're listening to the 602 Club.
Welcome to the 602 Club, Trek FM's local watering hole, here for a supplemental episode. It has been a while since we have had one of these, but we are excited to do one as we are on the journey to the Rise of Skywalker. And as we did with the journey to the other films, we are pretty intent on making sure that you're ready for the movie by talking about the content that is coming out. Christy and I covered Spark of the Resistance. We will have Resistance Reborn as well as Force Collector coming up for you. And so with me, a Jedi Master and a person that you know quite well from the network, our one and only Bruce Gibson.
I can't even live up to my own name. That's so good. Thank you for that introduction.
Well, you know, maybe we'll have some sound effects there. Bruce Gibson!
Hiya. How you doing, everyone? Glad to be here. Man, I am so stoked right now. I seriously am so stoked about Star Wars. I mean, I always am, but I mean, at this moment, with all the content we're getting right now, it's just like really exciting. I'm so stoked.
Well, and as we're recording this, it is one day before The Mandalorian drops, and so I think I'm right there with you. If we could, I would say our hearts are metaphorically on edge, just waiting for The Mandalorian to come out tomorrow. So.
I mean, this is like the most exciting time for me, is like any time a new Star Wars movie comes out, it's that day before. It's like, you know, Christmas Eve, or, you know, it's your, like the day before your birthday or something. And now this is Mandalorian. I'm not used to getting this excited about a new TV show. So, I mean, this is cool. I'm stoked.
Kind of cool that George's wish of having a live action Star Wars show is about to come true.
Yes. They need to work him into it somehow. Like just a cameo.
That would be, who is he? Baron Papanoida from, Pantora. So, yeah, I mean, it'd be great if he lived and just showed up randomly. I'd love it, yeah.
He's like, I'm still here. I'm still alive.
Well, we are going to be getting into Star Wars Allegiance, which is a 4-issue comic series, which is a part of the journey to the Rise of Star Wars, The Rise of Skywalker. So before we do that, of course, a quick reminder, as always, you can find us wherever you get your podcasts. If you do love the 602 Club, yeah, hit us up with a star rating review over there on Apple Podcasts. Let people know what you think of the show. Help it continue to grow and find more of an audience. You can find us on Twitter at TrekFM or on Facebook at facebook.com/TrekFM. We've got the listeners-only discussion group, which is called the Babel Conference there on Facebook. Type Babel into the search field and you'll find us. Or if you're on Trek.fm and you are on any of the show pages, there's a button that says discussion. If you press that, you can get into the group that way. You can get us an email. We love emails, trek.fm/contact. Choose the 602 Club, and then that email comes to Christy and I. And last but not least, we would love you to say thank you to our associate producers here through Patreon, Ken Tripp, Davis Grayson, Wyatt Millett, and Daniel Noah. Really appreciate these guys for supporting the network and the show. Now, with the size of the network that we have, it's impossible for the hosts like Bruce and myself to do this all alone. And so go over to patreon.com/TrekFM, see how you can be part of the team and support the network each and every month. We've got some great contribution levels, but every little bit helps. So again, patreon.com/TrekFM is where you can put your money where your mouth is, or where our mouth is, so we can keep doing these shows for you each and every week. Now, Bruce, so we mentioned there's only 4 issues here with this comic series, Star Wars Allegiance. And we are right after or sometime after. It's not really clear how far after The Last Jedi we are, but I would say the Resistance still seems in issue 1 to definitely be fledgling at most.
I would say that this is taking place probably a month or two before the Rise of Skywalker, just because how issue 4 ends. It kind of leads into... Yeah. It sounds like it's leading into the Rise of Skywalker. So here's a real quick nitpick complaint. This whole marketing campaign, A Journey to Star Wars, The Rise of Skywalker, that's fine for a cover, but I hate that it's in the crawl. The crawl starts off with Journey to Star Wars, The Rise of Skywalker, Allegiance Part 1, An Old Hope. That's a lot. That's a big title for a crawl. I don't like that. I should think it should have just been Allegiance Part 1, An Old Hope. But that's just my nitpick.
No, I think you're right. I think you absolutely hit that on the head. Well, it's a little silly. Like, we know what we're reading because we're reading it.
Yeah. Because anytime they republish these novels that say A Journey to the Force Awakens or whatever, they drop that when they republish the comics and the novels. So what are they going to do? Change the crawl? I hope so. But the crawl also starts off with Luke Skywalker is dead. I thought that was interesting too, because that's kind of how The Last Jedi starts off. Well, I'm sorry, The Force Awakens starts off with Luke Skywalker has vanished.
Missing. Yeah.
So, same type of thing. But anyway, I just wanted to call those out.
No, I think you've rightly kind of pointed to the fact that this is probably closer to the Rise of Skywalker than just about anything else. I would say it's definitely closer than Resistance Reborn. And we also read, Black Spire together and talked about that here. And I definitely think it's also closer than what we got with Christy and I talked about Spark of the Resistance. So the comic itself, it starts off very interesting, where the First Order is attacking anybody who has been giving aid to the Resistance. And in fact, they wipe out an entire world, Tanana, as I think you would say it, which is traditionally, even in the time of the Empire, was as a neutral planet. But they just lay waste to this place because they gave assistance to the Resistance, as they do anybody who comes by their planet, regardless of political affiliation.
And they even tell them that, the people on this planet, but that doesn't seem to phase anyone. And so it's like, we're just going to blow you guys up. Now, I don't think they blew up the planet, right? I mean, I think they just destroyed what was on the planet.
They pretty much just lay waste to all of the cities on the planet.
Yeah.
So, it does not go well for these people.
Yeah, because I wondered, because later there's a reference to, of Leia thinking about, just like, Alderaan, what happened to me. And I thought, well, Alderaan was blown up by the Death Star. I don't think they have the technology to blow up the planet. But lay waste is kind of how I figured it was.
It kind of feels like, in the beginning of The Last Jedi, where they lay waste to the Resistance base on Dakar, that they kind of basically do that same thing, where they turbo laser bomb all of the cities on this planet, just destroying everything, which, when you do that, is also going to destroy an entire ecosystem, basically create probably some sort of nuclear winter for them. And so for all intents and purposes, this planet is dust.
It's dust. And the species, if you look at that close-up on the first page, that little guy, he looks like the guy from Ice Age to me, like the squirrel or whatever. They're cute.
Yeah. It's a beautiful planet. It's an ice planet. And so all of their buildings are made out of ice. Apparently Elsa lives there.
Yes.
And is an interior decorator. This planet is gone, and that leads us to where the Resistance camp is, which is on a garbage planet of Anat. Which is also, I looked it up, it's actually in the same system as Bespin and Hoth. It's in that same system. the Anoid system. That
when you say you looked it up, what do you mean? Like, we've seen this planet before?
No, we've never seen this planet before, but I just looked it up in Wikipedia to see where apparently this place is, and it's that same system that, when Han and Leia and Chewie are escaping on the Falcon, Han looks up this system, and then, it's where Bespin is, and so this planet is one of the planets in that system.
Gotcha.
So,
okay. No, that's good to know.
Yeah. So, and we get, Connix running over to tell Leia that this planet has been destroyed, and that's where she ends up in that same position. Like you mentioned, like, it's kind of just like Alderaan, like this, it's been wiped out, and they thought that they had gotten past this.
Yeah, and then, she's saying, well, we need to recruit more people, and I have a mission. And I thought it was kind of odd how she's just saying, like, I'm going to take the Falcon and go, but she doesn't seem to tell anybody what she's doing. I don't know why it's kind of a secret, but she decides to take Rose with her because she says, if something goes wrong, she needs an engineer. But I kind of wonder if that was the real reason she wanted to take Rose. If there was just, maybe they have a good relationship at this point and she just wants her companionship and she needs her support, or if it was just that reason she really feels like she needs an engineer in case something goes wrong.
Well, so this is the thing, in this part of the comic, we mentioned a couple of things. We mentioned Vi Moradi being on her mission on Batuu. We also mentioned what Snap Wexley and his group is doing. They're scouting remote shipyards. Poe and Finn are tracking down weapons. And they mentioned they're on a risky mission, and that's where we see Rose say, how risky? So I get the feeling like Leia is taking Rose because she's worried about Finn, and she's like, this will get her mind off things. That's what I kind of got out of this.
Well, I'm also glad you mentioned that line, how risky, because when I read that line, I thought she's thinking she's worried about Finn because, number one, she showed interest in Finn in The Last Jedi. And number two,
she did kiss him. I mean, they got to first base.
It's all about love. Oh, I can't believe she saved him. I really wanted him to sacrifice himself. I thought it was going to be so great for that character.
Yeah, me too. Well, I mean, I think the fact that you mentioned with her kind of desire for Finn, there is definitely a moment that happens there. So, what I think a lot of people are interested in is kind of seeing where this all goes, and if there are any actual relationships in The Rise of Skywalker, because I would kind of like there to be, because, in the end, if we're going to wrap this trilogy up, I would like to think that the story kind of continues happily for these people. And in many ways, romantic relationships are a way to kind of help us know that the future looks bright. When you ended up with the end of Return of the Jedi, and Leia and Han have finally kind of found their way towards each other and in a relationship, you have a good feeling about the future. So it would be kind of nice to have somebody get in a relationship, like maybe it's Finn and Rose, maybe it's Poe and Rey, maybe, I don't know. So
you have to continue populating the galaxy. Someone's got to do it, right?
Yeah.
So we need some relationships here. And I remember the second thing I wanted to mention about this is that this also shows that Rose is okay, thinking a positive, because the end of The Last Jedi, she had been injured and she was on a medical bed. So now we see that she's up again, which we knew already because we've seen that she's going to be in the next movie. But this is, I don't know if we've seen anything prior to this story of Rose. Nothing that I've read so far. But
well, and so this is the thing. I think if I remember correctly, the timeline seems strange, because they haven't laid out when all of these things actually take place. The only one, I know Resistance Reborn is actually the first of all of these, but I think that this and the Spark of the Resistance, I think that this one is first and then Spark of the Resistance is last. So, because there is a piece of this storyline all throughout the issues that actually they make mention of already having happened in the Spark of the Resistance. So
Gotcha. Yeah, I haven't read that one yet.
Yeah.
Yet.
So we get to Rey here, who's on this, planet. She's doing her scavenger thing because they're on a trash planet, and she's using her skills that she has. And she's in a big fight with this big monster. And I got the feeling like, Rey in this story is kind of having she seems to be maybe having a little trouble with her connection with the Force. It doesn't quite work the way she thinks it's going to on this big monster. The crawl at the beginning of the comic mentions that she's a Jedi in training, which seems odd because nobody seems to be training her in anything Jedi that I've read at all. She just kind of seems to be adrift as a character.
I agree. And if it's like if she is being trained as a Jedi, who's training her? I mean, is it, we haven't been told if there's like a Luke Force Ghost or some other Force Ghost, or if Leia's training her in some capacity. And maybe they're not telling.
Finally reading the Jedi texts.
Maybe that's it. Yeah, maybe that's it. I mean, I'm sure they're holding that for the Rise of Skywalker. But I love Rey. She's one of my favorite characters. Mm-hmm. And even in this, there was something a little off about her, because when she's doing this training, she's fighting this beast, and she's the one instigating. She's picking on it and everything. And then she's like, now you're coming after me. And now, wait, I'm sorry. It's my fault. I'm the one who started this. And I'm like, really? You're going around picking fights with beasts? Is that part of the training? I just thought that was a little odd.
I'm really glad that you mentioned that, because her characterization seems completely off here. She feels like somebody who is just wanting action all the time. Like, that comes up later on too. And it just seems strange because, we know that, in The Last Jedi, things don't go the way she wanted them to with Luke. And, she doesn't really, she is definitely a character who is willing to, be action oriented in the films, but just to kind of see her willy-nilly picking a fight with a monster seems strange to me. So, yeah, I would say I'm not a huge fan of her storyline in this. She just kind of seems super impetuous, and like she hasn't really learned anything in any of the previous experiences she's had, with The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. But I also can't necessarily fault Rey, too, because nobody's really taught her crap.
Right. No one's taught her crap, and I'm jumping ahead to something, because later in a later issue, she mentions she doesn't even have her lightsaber with her. So I'm a little confused. It's like, if she's training as a Jedi, why doesn't she have a lightsaber with her if she's on a mission?
And the question I was wondering is that, has she even created the lightsaber again? Like, has she been able to put it back together at this point, or has she not at this point? So when she said that, I thought to myself, well, maybe she hasn't actually fixed. And so when she says, if I had my lightsaber with me, you'd be in trouble. And maybe that's because she hasn't actually found a way to fix the lightsaber. Well,
that's a good point too. Yeah.
So
that's why she's not using the lightsaber in this training against this beast.
Or this fight picking against this beast.
Yeah. The fight picking.
Yeah. Anyway, so issue 1 has a couple more things. One is that the mission that Poe and Finn are on is to lead them to weapons. So they find a lead to weapons on the moon of Avedot, and they don't realize that they're being secretly followed by a First Order informant and a group of bounty hunters that are meant to capture them. So that's going to be a part of the story that plays out for them, and that one of them is a Clawdite, which that was kind of cool to see again.
I was a little confused by this one. I mean, I kind of like this, the bounty hunters are coming after them or interested in them. And one of them even there's this distortion to her look as if she's changing shape, which is later confirmed. So I was glad to know that I was perceiving that correctly. One thing I wasn't sure about is there's a cloaked person that's talking to BB-8 saying, I thought I told you two to stay out of trouble. I didn't know who that was. I'm assuming that's Poe as the story went along, but I didn't think it looked like him.
Yeah, no, you're right. It does seem kind of strange because as Poe was apparently getting information, Finn is getting in a fight in a bar, and it makes sense then later on why the people don't realize that Poe is with Finn because he's cloaked.
Yeah. But he looks like a Jedi. That's what threw me off.
Yeah, he does kind of look like a Jedi. So, and they report, these people report back to the First Order that they have found, Poe. That these bounty hunters report back to the First Order that they have found Finn, and this whole scene plays out just like Empire Strikes Back, where the guy's like, we don't have time to follow up on every lead, and Kylo Ren's like, oh yes we do, because he's right behind him, so it's straight out of Empire.
And it also shows that Kylo Ren is also still in charge, and he's still on this mission. He's just so determined,
Mm-hmm. Well, and so issue 1 ends with us figuring out this mission that Leia is going to go on, and the mission is to go to Mon Cala and meet with the Mon Calamari about one, helping them with ships for the Resistance, and she thinks that this is going to be a friendly welcome, and yet sadly the comic ends with them being met by some Quarren as well as some other Mon Cal, and well, they are not met in a friendly manner. In fact, they have guns pointing at them. So
I think this is one aspect of the comics I enjoyed the most, because it shows that Mon Cala is not a friend necessarily to the Resistance. I mean, you assume they would be. They've been very involved in the rebellion in the past, but they have a beef against Leia and how things were handled. And I feel as if they feel there's a threat because of the actions that maybe she has taken or the Resistance has taken. And of course, we find out later there's something more behind that, but it's great to visit the planet again and just kind of see the infighting even between their own people. And Leia has to somehow convince them, even as she's scuba diving, into, joining the Resistance or the rebellion, whatever we're calling it right now.
Yeah, no, I thought that was really interesting too. And I was glad that we were going back to a place that's familiar. I think what I liked about this part was, and this is actually happening in a couple of, and I'm going to, I'll preface this by saying we'll talk way more about this when we get there, but they do this in Resistance Reborn, in the sense that they go to some places that we've been before. And I really appreciated that because, as much as I enjoy new places, I think the sequel trilogy has actually suffered because it hasn't balanced out at all, going back to places that we know as well as new. And in fact, they haven't done that with the aliens either. And so at least so far in this comic, we're seeing aliens that we're familiar with, not just the new aliens from the new trilogy, which I'm very thankful for because I like having new and old put together, because then it makes Star Wars feel more cohesive.
I like seeing the old, just like you mentioned, and digging deeper into them and seeing what they're doing. But now I'd also like to see some exploration of the new and learn about their culture, their homeworlds, of some of the aliens we've seen. So that would be cool. So
we get to issue 2, and this part is called Troubled Waters, because they're on Mon Cala, get it? And it looks like it's going to be a fight. And then we get Akbar's son arrives, Aftab, and he is able to defuse this situation. Him and Leia embrace, and then they spend some time at the mourning shrines so that they can honor his father, Akbar. And I really liked this part of the comic. I thought, it's sad that Akbar was so just shuffled aside in the sequel trilogy altogether, really. And, he got a very unceremonious death. So it was nice to see somewhere that we're remembering this character in a way that I think befits who this character is, especially with the legacy of the Clone Wars and Return of the Jedi.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought about it that way. I just remember thinking, they probably wanted to use Akbar in this comic and realize, oh, wait, he's dead. Well, we'll just have his son be the representative. But you're right. It does acknowledge his death. And, even Leia talks about, I was there at the time. I wish there was something, I could have done. So, it's not just a line in the movie. Oh, Akbar's dead.
Can I just mention something that I've noticed about what we're getting for the Rise of Skywalker?
Yes, what?
So, have you noticed that everything that Ryan took out of the picture, that JJ has put back into the picture? So, you smash the helmet, so Kylo puts it back together. You destroyed the lightsaber, but Rey is going to put it back together. So you killed Akbar. Oh, we'll bring in his son. Oh, so you killed Snoke. Oh, well, we'll one-up you with Palpatine. I mean, it just kind of feels like everything that had been taken away in the Last Jedi has actually gotten put back in some way in the new movie. I just think that's a little bit funny.
So maybe we get Luke back in the next movie? Because he was destroyed.
That's, I mean, obviously, I don't think we can't not have Luke back in some form or fashion.
Well, we know he's in the credits, so we know Mark Hamill's back. So
and we heard his voice. We know that he is somewhere in the movie. Good times, though. I just something I noticed in reading this comic. I was like, "Oh, Akbar had died, so we'll just replace him with his son." That was kind of funny.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah. So this is the next moment to where Rey and Rose have a conversation, and how she's just really annoyed that everybody else is getting some action. In the sense of getting the action, like the cooler assignments, and they're off in the end of the rim without any real action to be had. And this is again, I think, a point where I just felt like, do they know Rey as a character at all? Do we know what her voice is supposed to sound like? Because this did not feel like Rey to me. It just felt like a generic kind of action heroine character who's bored instead of, this character that we've gotten to know.
No, I felt the same way. She seems very pouty, and and just earlier when they, arrive to the planet and there's a confrontation, she's just like, they said something like they're going to, stop them or something. She goes, "You are welcome to try." She's just so aggressive and so and pouty, and she's on the ship. When are we going to see some action? And I don't know, maybe she's just in a mood. Maybe, after a year of this, she is just at a point where she's like, okay, I'm ready to move on. I'm ready to do more, and nothing's happening. And haven't conquered all the Jedi abilities that I want to conquer. I mean, I'm just playing into this as to maybe the reason why, but I just think that they didn't write her the way we think she should be written.
I don't even know if it's how I think she should be written. It feels like, from what we've gotten, it just feels rather strange to have her, like you said. I feel like you kind of put it well. She kind of feels like a pouty teenager.
Yeah.
And, and let me put it this way. So think about where Luke is between, episodes 5 and 6. I think he's, a character who's maturing, and I think the thing that I feel with Rey here is she still feels so green. And part of that, I think, is just possibly the timeline that we've gotten for her. The fact that the first two movies happened back to back, I actually think really hampers her development as a character.
Yes, that is one thing that I was saying before The Last Jedi came out that I was not looking forward to, is I wanted it to move ahead in time, because then you move the characters ahead and the situations they're in ahead, and not just like pick up where you left off. You're right. I mean, Rey hasn't, and Finn and all these other characters, there isn't a whole lot of development you get from them from going from the Force Awakens to the end of The Last Jedi. And so now this is 1 year, The Rise of the Skywalkers, 1 year after The Last Jedi. So now when we read this material, it's less than a year since The Last Jedi. So there isn't a lot of development. There isn't a lot of growth. Like you're saying, between going from, A New Hope to Empire is 3 years? And then it's like another year to Return of the Jedi. So there's a lot of room for Luke to grow in there.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I think what it means is that for the character of Rey specifically, as we go to The Rise of Skywalker, there's a lot of heavy lifting to do with that character.
Yeah.
So,
because you think about it, those 3 movies take place within a year. In 1 year. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's just so much to do.
Well, that's until episodes 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15.
Please, if there is a God in heaven, which there is, I pray to him that never happens. So we get Poe and Finn, who arrive on Avidot, and they are being tracked, even though they don't know it, by these bounty hunters. And they find the weapons, but as they do, they are attacked by them. So their storyline, honestly, I would say, even though it's the B storyline, feels like a C or D storyline just because it's so basic.
I didn't think of it as like a C or D storyline necessarily, but when you say it's so basic, that supports what I was going to say, and that was, this is a typical Star Wars type of story. You're being tracked by bounty hunters, and you're in a situation you got to get out of it, and you're trying to bring supplies back to your base, and what are you going to do? And yeah, that's it. I mean, that's all that's really involved in this story.
Well, and it feels like, I think the other thing is, for someone like you and I, it feels a lot like a lot of the stories we got in Rebels. Like we're on a supply run and oh no, there's bounty hunters, or, like somebody after us and we got to get away. So
even remind me of Resistance in some ways too. Yeah.
Yep. I agree.
Basic.
Yeah, it is very basic, and no, not the language. But we do get a little bit more of the First Order, and they have arrived on Fondor, which has a shipbuilding facility, and
which I like.
Yes, which it looks very Rogue One-ish, which is cool.
Yes.
I liked that a lot. And they have taken control of these shipyards under the pretense that they had been contacted by the Resistance, even though they would refuse to help them. And this is where Kylo Ren institutes a no-tolerance policy for fraternization with the Resistance in any form. Like, basically, if you take a Resistance call, you're dead.
I think it's a little overboard. I mean, when they did the planet that we talked about in issue 1, I was a bit surprised. It's like, wow, gee, they think that they helped the Resistance, and they're saying, well, not really, kind of, sort of. And they're like, okay, we're going to destroy everything. And then this, it's like, Kylo's pouty too. It's like, if he doesn't like someone, he's always like, has to kill them or make an example of them. I don't know. It's just, I feel like they're just going to kill everybody they don't like. That's
pretty
a
much.
little
I mean,
much.
that's the First Order MO.
Yeah, it is, but it just seems like a little overboard to me.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you, because it does feel like this is a moment where they're trying to make the First Order feel worse than the Empire. But I would say that what it kind of comes down to me, it just seems like the First Order is more petulant than the Empire, and it doesn't seem like they have a real plan for governing the galaxy that they're in, other than just by absolute 100% fear and intimidation in a way that you're just asking for people to rise up against, which is, I guess, good news for the Resistance, because they need all of the help they can get.
Yeah. I mean, it just feels to me as if, like, you know, if you're a First Order person, you're just going to kill somebody because they bumped into you. Or they said, like, oh, yeah, I saw somebody from the Resistance over there. Did you try to stop them? Well, no. Ugh, I'm going to kill you. It just seems overboard.
Yeah, it's a little much. So we do get some more. We go back to Mon Cala, and you've got Leia gets an audience with the King Ichar, who is a descendant of Lee Char that we met in the Clone Wars, which is really cool. She's able to give her plea, and they say that the king says that they will take a day to consider that. And in the background, we have a character that we have met before, Nosarai, who we met in the Clone Wars, and he and his assistant are basically plotting against Leia as a way to get rid of her and her group, because they are worried that the longer that they stay on Mon Cala, the more at risk they are with the First Order. And so we can skip over the Finn and Poe storyline, because honestly, at this point, they're just trying to escape the bounty hunters. And Chewie and Rose and Rey are on the surface on Mon Cala, loading up some supplies that they're given, and they are attacked by a group of it basically, people saying, you're not wanted here, leave, get off, you drylanders, basically.
Yeah. You off-worlders.
Yes. So, we start to have this fight. Rey kicks some butt, and then we get this character, and I don't know how exactly you would say their name. It's always interesting trying to say Star Wars names that you've never heard pronounced. But we get this character, Chad Kolgi, and he is Nosarai's assistant, and he contacts the First Order and tells them that Leia and her group are here. And that is how the book ends.
Yes. He talks to Hux.
Yes, which, who doesn't love Hux? Great hair, really bad attitude, so...
Pouty. Everybody's pouty.
Very pouty. Issue 3, then, of course, starts with the fact that Chewie and 3PO and Rose and Rey are all in these pods before the king because, they started a riot, or didn't start a riot, but they were defending themselves against this group. And the politics of this really start to heat up between Nosarai and Aftab. And in that, Nosarai basically says that they could solve this by having the ancient rite of challenge, and Rey accepts.
She's like, yeah, bring it on. I'll do it. Me.
Because we know she's been wanting some action.
Yeah.
So,
and it's not, she doesn't say it quite like that. That's pretty much how she's saying it. I mean, she's just like, I'm ready for something. Bring it on. And she is ready for the challenge, but it's not with one of the calamari or whatever. It's some robot. It's the droid.
Yeah, they're going to end up having to fight not Nosarai or his assistant. They're going to have to fight this security droid.
Yeah.
Which, that's not great. And meanwhile, back on the other side of the story, Finn and Poe are trying to escape, and Finn leads the bounty hunters on a wild chase so that Poe can secure the weapons. That's pretty much that storyline.
Yeah, but I kind of like that, Finn's like, I'll run and you hide. You try to get everything done. If anything, it's kind of funny in a way when you see Finn's trying to get away from everything.
And it's interesting, so we get to the fight happening between Rey and the security droid, and it was interesting because they realized that the security droid is not programmed to not target anyone else other than Rey. Like, it doesn't care about bystanders. And because of that, Rose steps in and helps Rey, which breaks the traditional challenge. And because of this, they're going to be exiled from the planet.
Yeah. my thought on this, and I don't have a problem with this. It sounds like the way I just did that. But the thing that I thought was funny is I like Rose as a character. Don't get me wrong. But so like I said earlier, I didn't like that Rose saved Finn from his sacrifice. And then I didn't like how Rose stepped in and saved Rey in this. Like, why does Rose always have to interfere? Stop it, Rose. Rey can handle herself. Come on. You see her doing flips, just like in the new trailer we saw. She can handle herself. Stop it, Rose. You're always getting in the way.
Yeah,
This Rose has too many thorns for me.
Yeah, it was really interesting because, I mean, at this moment, Rey is on the ground, and this droid has its, blaster hand pointed right at her. And then Rose shoots its head off. So I think a part of me would just have loved to have seen Rey be able to take care of it and like have a force moment. I feel like that would be more powerful for the character of Rey here. I want to see Rey be able to kind of, like you said, handle herself regardless of whether or not she has her lightsaber.
Yeah, we don't need Rose to be Wesley Crusher of Star Wars, saving everybody.
That is true. Because they're about to be exiled, they're on a platform. They've been given some supplies and a transport to get back to the Falcon. And so these supplies are being loaded up for them, and they notice a Quarren kind of sneaking on the ship, and the ship blows up. And at the same time that's happening, Connix is trying to contact Leia to let her know that the First Order is on their way to Mon Cala. So we end with kind of a double whammy. The First Order is on their way with an armada, and the ship's been blown up, and they're all standing right next to the ship, and the ship explosion looks pretty big, so we're not quite sure how everybody's going to survive yet.
But they will survive, because there's a movie that has to play out.
This is really true, and we saw the trailer, so we know they're not going to die.
Yes. Yeah. I kind of wish that Akbar's son would have said, it's a trap, but we didn't get that either.
We didn't. He hasn't picked up the family lingo yet, so.
No. But what I really like going into issue 4 is Rey helps block everyone from the explosion by getting all the crates kind of formed together. She, elevates them and pushes them together to block the explosion from hurting their friends.
Which was pretty cool, it was another moment. And see, I feel like I would have liked to have this moment on top of the moment we talked about in the arena, where, again, Rey was able to handle this herself. But yes, she is able to save them, which is great. And then her and Rose go and chase this Quarren that they saw fleeing the scene, which leads to a wild, Quarren chase across the city, which they're able to track him down, and it's none other than Chad Colglee, who is the advisor to Nosarai. And so he's the one who blew up the ship, tried to kill them all. And at that moment, pretty much about that moment, the First Order arrives on Mon Cala.
You know what? I just realized something about Rose. She's very sneaky. Because she's the one who stops him. Like, always, we see Rey chasing after him, and then she comes out of nowhere and just, boom, whams into him. And that's just like in the arena. She just kind of, appears.
That's what happens, though, because Rey is not as smart as Rose, because Rose got on a speeder, and speeders are faster.
Rose is just very sneaky. She knows how to get to the right place at the right time without anybody noticing.
That's true. Maybe she should be a spy.
Maybe we should have new movies about Rose and her children and start a whole new saga called Sneaky Star Wars.
Sneaky Star Wars. Well, luckily, Poe and Finn are able to escape. It's a big to-do. It's very action-oriented, the set piece of where they escape. It's honestly not that exciting, I would say. This storyline just, honestly, I hate to say, but it left me bored.
Well, it's just, a fun little romp. That's all it is. And then, when Finn Well, we haven't got to that part yet. I'll wait till we get there.
No, go ahead. I think it's okay for us to wrap up their storyline here.
Okay, well then, like, Finn is, like, propelled from the big explosion, and he's not setting off his parachute, and Poe has to come in with the ship, and as Finn is falling from his, like, escape pod or from his chair, whatever, just screaming the whole time, and then Poe just, like, swoops in and tries to capture him in the ship, and boom, Finn lands into the cockpit. And of course, Poe's like, yeehaw! And Finn's like, did we get the weapons? Well, we got most of the weapons.
Yeah, it's just a really goofy ending.
It is, but it's funny.
It is. So we are on Mon Cala. The First Order has arrived, and Leia confronts the King with the news about Nosarai and Chad Glee, about them being the ones that had been working behind the scenes. They're the reason the First Order is here. And Leia asks for their help. And in doing that, this was probably the best part of the whole comic series, is that, you know, she says, look, this is not about us asking that Nosarai be punished. We understand, you know, obviously he's doing this with a reason, because he's wanting to try and protect his planet. But we have to work together, or else the First Order is going to take up everything, you know. And she even says, we must be a rising tide. And so she asks for their help, and she talks about the sacrifice that this is going to take to do. And she even mentions all the sacrifices that she has had to bear, of course, with, you know, her planet being exploded, losing her husband, you know, I mean, she's lost her brother.
Those images. We see,
yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I thought that this was a really good part of the comic, and I really appreciated that there was some real heart to the reason behind why the Mon Cala should join the Resistance in, you know, fighting the First Order, and be willing to sacrifice to do so.
Yeah, we don't need to be fighting amongst each other. We need to be fighting the true enemy. And she says that. We need to start focusing on the true enemy. And I think it's at that point that they realize, you know, that the First Order is destroying them within their own selves. That they really need to take down the First Order to have harmony on their planet.
Well, and I thought this was a great moment, too, because this is where Guy uses himself to distract the First Order, so Aftab and the Falcon and a bunch of ships from Mon Cala can escape. And that way, the Resistance has a larger, you know, group of ships now, which is excellent. But the comic ends on a really dark note, you know, that they escape. But then you end with Hux and the First Order Armada over Mon Cala, and how they're going to make them pay for helping the Resistance. And it just says to be continued in the Rise of Skywalker. So we have sort of a win here for the Resistance, but it's definitely not a win for Mon Cala, that's for sure.
Yeah, that last panel, you see a stormtrooper, the back of his head, approaching a family. It's like, you know, there's the mom, the dad, and one of their children there. And then the youngest one has his or her arms wrapped around, I guess, the mother or something. And it's like, oh my gosh, are they going to be killed? You know, it is a dark ending. And yeah, the fact that it says to be continuing the Rise of Skywalker, I'm not expecting that it starts off at this place. But I think we're going to see Mon Cala in the film, or similar planets being destroyed and conquered, and we're going to really start to feel the weight of what's going on in the galaxy and the torture that's happening to these planets.
I think, so to kind of wrap this up and give our ratings with this, Bruce, I'm wondering where, you know, you kind of land with this, and does it feel at all like it helps prepare you, you know, for which its whole thing, the reason for existing is to prepare you for the Rise of Skywalker?
Well, having not seen that movie, I would say that I'm pretty sure to say that this is not essential reading. I don't think you have to read this to know what's going to happen in the movie, but it's nice to see this, to know that, you know, our friends that we've seen in these movies are working together, and they're still trying to establish the resistance by getting planets that we know of and are familiar of, and species that we're aware of that were friends of the rebellion to get involved. And so it kind of gives me hope that we'll see Mon Cala ships in the new film. And it's also nice to see that Poe and Finn are working together. So it's not essential reading. I mean, it was nice little prelude, I guess, to the movie, but it didn't do a whole lot for me. I mean, if anything, it just is what's taking place before the Rise of Skywalker, and that is that Poe, Finn, Rey, Leia, Rose, C-3PO, BB-8, they're all together, and they're, you know, trying to get the resistance built up to fight the First Order. And that, I mean, we didn't see any fighting of the First Order in this. It's just trying to avoid the Force Order and build up the resistance with enough people and ships to go after them in the next movie.
So what would your rating be, you think?
I would give this one 3.5 fried calamaris out of 5.
See, I think you really hit something on the head when you were kind of wrapping this up, because, yeah, this feels like the no-brainer. You know, like, this is the type of story that has to happen. But I think the thing about this is that a big part of the story, the part with Finn and Poe, wasn't actually all that interesting. Like, we don't have any idea what kind of weapons they're really going for. It just seems so generic as a storyline. And the storyline we get with Leia and, you know, with the Mon Cala is decently interesting. We know how important their ships have been to the rebellion and to the resistance as well. And so for her to go back there to ask for their help is excellent, you know, and to find a way to, you know, honor Akbar and all that too is great. But I think that the thing about this is that it seems to do so little with 4 issues. Like, again, the storylines seem very basic, and I want, I guess, more. And I think part of this is that we're really afraid, at least in this comic here, to move the characters in any way, shape, or form. But we're also really not moving the resistance all as much. I mean, when you see in the Rise of Skywalker trailer, that last trailer, all of those ships show up, and, like, they escape with, like, 12 ships here. I'm like, really? Like, that's all we were able to get out of this? Like, we're not, you know, so there's a part of me where it's like, some of this is good, but it also feels like, at least in this comic here, they're holding so much back for the movie that it's like this, again, like you said, I wouldn't call it essential reading. It kind of feels like a way to try and possibly make money so that, you know, people will read some comics before. But this doesn't feel like it does much for the story of the Resistance. And it just feels, it feels like a letdown, because remember when we read Shatter Empire, and we really enjoyed that comic, and we felt like it did a great job of kind of setting the stage very well. And of course, at that point, we knew nothing. But I mean, this doesn't even really seem to connect all that well with much of the other ancillary materials we've been getting.
Yeah, it feels to me as if they said, hey, we need, let's do a 4-issue comic leading into the new movie. So, you know, we don't want to really reveal anything. Just, you know, tell some story that's leading into this. And so it's almost like, okay, here's chapter 1. And the movie's the rest of the chapters. Like, there isn't really a whole lot just here. Like, if you went to the author and you said, and to the artists and stuff and said, hey, do a 4-issue Star Wars comic, they'd probably come out with something really cool. But this one is like, well, we gotta be careful, and it's not to overshadow the movie, and it's just kind of like showing what the characters are doing right before the movie. So what would the characters be doing? Well, they'd probably be trying to get help, and, you know, they probably need some weapons. You know, we're just, you know, gearing up for what we need to do in the movie and fight the First Order. So that's it. Yeah. They got to get help from some friends and find some weapons. Yeah, there we go. And we'll use our favorite characters in this?
I'd say I'd probably rate this 3 out of 5. Yeah, 3 out of 5. It's there. It's a thing that happened. It's probably more like a 2.5 out of 5, but I'll be generous. I liked the art. So.
Yes, that's a good point. I did like the art. I'm glad you mentioned that. And I love the fighting sequences with Rey. So
yes, those were cool. Those were very cool. So yeah, all in all, I mean, we're ready for Star Wars, as we talked about at the beginning of the episode. We're very ready for that. But Bruce, if people want to catch up with you here on the network or elsewhere, where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Admiral_Rex. You can find me here on the network on Literary Treks with Dan Gunther. And of course, Matt was just recently on an episode. And we're covering the Star Trek books and comics on that podcast. And then I also do Live from the Edge with Brandy Jacala, where we review a new episode of Discovery on YouTube live with everyone in the chat room the night after an episode premieres. And speaking of Star Wars, I'm on the Star Wars Report podcast with Riley Blanton. And of course, I'm always in the Babel Conference. You'll always find me there.
Which is excellent. And you will find me all over the place on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, and Vero under the name MattRushing02. I'm here on the network. I do The Orb with Chris Jones. When we get a chance, we talk about Star Trek Deep Space Nine. You can find me doing 2 shows over on the Nerd Party Network. One is called Owl Post for Drea Kaufman, as we talk about Harry Potter one chapter at a time. You can also find me doing Aggressive Negotiations with John Mills, which is all about Star Wars. So if you like Star Wars, and you probably do since you're listening to this episode, that is the show for you. And then last but not least, I'm talking about films through the lens of faith with my good friend Courtney on Cinema Stories. But thank you so much for joining us. And may the Force be with you.
Thank you.